I found this very good, I thought, I don't know what this is, a flyer from the Department of Homeland Security. And it's cybersecurity questions for CEOs. I thought, wow, that is fantastic. It even has kind of key cyber risk concepts. But yeah, I guess you can find it at the dhs.gov/cyber. So that is pretty cool. But let's go through each of these 5 questions. I thought they were good. Number 1, these are questions that CEOs should ask about cyber risk. How is our executive leadership informed about the current level and business impact of cyber risks to our company? How is executive leadership informed about the current level and business impact of cyber risks to our company? Sadly, I see a lot of companies, it becomes this grassroots things, or the security people will, I'll tell you when you need to know. Well, if you're a CEO or leading a company, that is not the right answer. You should know good, bad, ugly, and everything in between. And so these are good questions to ask. So, really, the easiest way to pick this one off is develop metrics. Develop board facing metrics on cybersecurity and cyber risks. So, you got to kind of define what those are. You got to define how you're going to measure them, and then obviously your frequency to report them. So let's say phishing attempts. That would be a metric, right? So phishing attempts. How many phishing attempts have we had? Oh, we've had 27 in the last quarter. I'm making that up, obviously. And then another metric is how many phishing links were clicked. 2. Oh, okay, that's a great dialogue for a board. Or 0, even better. So if there's 2 that were clicked, ooh, okay, what happened? What do we do with those? And then there can be a debrief about those 2. If none were hit, that's great. That's a good metric, but you're monitoring. It's a trust but verify. You're seeing what's happening in your organization regarding cyber risk. So the easiest way to do that, quite honestly, is develop metrics. You don't develop a thousand metrics. Develop a handful or 10, whatever makes sense for your business. It's a dialogue. It's a measurement. It's a way to see how things are going, and then to confidently know, hey, I'm on top of this stuff. I'm paying attention. And then you can expand it as you go. So start small. Start with 5. Start small and then just expand as you go. But be consistent about them and be clear about how they're measured. They're not somebody's gut, somebody's feeling, somebody what they want to say. No, it's very quantifiable, it's very objective, and be clear about that. The second one is, what is the current level and business impact of cyber risks to our company? And what is our plan to address identified risks? Great question. Before that question, I would even say, do we even know how we're identifying risks? So this is called risk assessment, risk identification practices. So do we even have those practices? Do we identify risk? Once we identify risk, how do we document it? How do we analyze it? How do we prioritize it? What's our risk tolerance to know what needs to be treated and what doesn't need to be treated? This should be presented at the board level. And it's funny, I was just doing a risk assessment with the company just the other day, as a matter of fact, and the security people, the risk was, we don't have this tool. That's not a risk. The tool is the solution to some risk. And so that's part of the disconnect, right? The reason I bring that up is because it's part of the disconnect. Like, technical security people think about tools and technical controls, and oh, I read this article about VPN, we need to turn that on. I read this article about this, we need to turn that on. And that's how they think. And board members don't think that way, and CEOs don't think that way. They think, what is the risk to my organization? Well, the risk to your organization is you're going to lose all your data. Great. How do you fix that? We back up the data. There's the technical control. The risk is not, we don't have a backup solution. That's not the risk. Who cares about a backup solution? The risk from a CEO level is, we're going to lose all our data. Oh, well, that's not good. What do we need to do? Backup solution. See how that works? So it's speaking the language of the CEO, speaking the language of the board, so they can understand clearly the risks and then what's in place or not in place to mitigate that risk, and then going from there. And this is a great tool for cyber people and tech people, because guess what? This is how you let your CEO know You need to buy this thing, like right now, like DLP, data loss prevention, for example. It's easier now in the cloud world, but it's still expensive. You still got to put it in place and run it. And, it's like, do we really need that? Are you sure we need that? Well, guess what? If you do a risk assessment that highlights the risks and then, oh, look at this, DLP satisfies that. Oh, yeah, I don't want to lose my customer data. I don't want to be fined by the regulatory agencies. I don't want to be written up in the newspaper. There's the risks. I don't want to have to explain to my customers I lost their data. That's not good. There's the risks that the executive team can understand. And then, by the way, here's a solution. There could be other solutions, but that could be one. And so it's a great tool to kind of bring everybody on the same page to make those decisions. Number 3. How does our cybersecurity program apply industry standards and best practices? That's a great question. My response here is you got to run your program, the whole program, aligning to whatever industry framework, compliance mechanism, SOC 2, NIST CSF, high trust, whatever you do, or multiple. But guess what? A lot of companies try to manage and run all of that stuff with Excel and email. It's a disaster. You cannot do any sort of dashboarding off of that. So this is where a GRC tool comes into play that can really help you. Here's our risks, here's our controls, here's how they map to the frameworks, here's how they map to compliance mechanisms. And then you can have a dashboard that shows we're 94% compliant. Oh, I thought we were 100. Let's see what that 6% is. Or better yet, we think we're 100. We do all the mapping and then we go, oh, we're 51%. That's not good. And then when you do multiple frameworks, you have to line them together so you don't have separate control sets for each framework, which is impossible to manage. And so a tool can help you with that as well. But the bottom line here is really being able to have a dashboard that you can present to your executive team that says, here's our program, whether it be SOC 2 or high trust, whatever it is, and here's how we know our controls are designed and implemented, and we're monitoring them for success. And if they fail, guess what? We mark that control is out of place, which then affects our dashboard. And it's great dialogue to have at the executive team level to say, yeah, we've had a few blips in this area, but that's okay. We are on it. We know it. Ignorance is the worst problem, right? Is you just don't know your controls failed until some regulator or auditor shows up, and then you're like, oh, I thought we were still doing that. Nope, we're not. Oh man, too late, right? Like you want to be on top of that. And so those dashboards that show compliance can really be very, very helpful in keeping you aligned. Question 4, how many and what types of cyber incidents do we detect in a normal week? What is the threshold for notifying our executive leadership? That is a great question. We're not going to send to the executive leadership that Susie's mouse broke and so forgot their password. They don't care about that. They care about risks to the organization. And so you have to define your incident management, your security incident management. You have to define your program such that you can answer that question. What is the threshold for notifying our executive leadership? Every company should know the answer to that question. But you got to design your program to do that. And then you have to have a way to track your incidents, a way to measure them, a way to categorize them. And then that feeds back into the metrics, right? And so now you have a metric specifically for that. And if you want to categorize them phishing and whatever, then you can do the different categorizations. But that's really the name of the game there is what is the threshold for notifying? Many companies cannot even answer that question. Number 5, how comprehensive is our cyber incident response plan? How often is it tested? Great questions. So a cyber incident response plan, or acronymed as an IRP, is a very common thing to have documented. It basically defines how you're going to respond to an incident. And it typically has levels of incidents and how you rate and categorize that and in what you do for the different levels. So if it's a critical incident, I might be calling the Department of Homeland Security to notify them that something has happened. I'm just making that up. Or if it's a low criticality incident, I'm logging it, I'm triaging it, I'm maybe putting somebody through some training, and I'm moving on, like all the different categories, because you can't handle all your incidents the same way. It's not reasonable, right? That's just the reality. And so one, that IRP should be documented. But then here's the kicker. I love the second part. How often do we test our IRP? What? Why in the world would we need to test anything? Because it looks great on paper and it feels heavy and ooh, look at all those words. But is it going to do its job? Because this is not check, I got an IRP, yay me. Is this thing going to do the job? Is it going to accomplish the goal that we want to accomplish in the moment of a very serious incident? Do I know what to do? Does the 10 other 10 team members that are part of this, do they know what to do? Do we know who to call? Do we have forensic analysis on backup? Do we know how to isolate? Do we even know what our process is? And testing can help you do that. It doesn't mean you do a real incident, because hopefully, you never have that, but it does happen. You can simulate the testing, and you can do that in all sorts of different ways. You can do it as simply as a tabletop, but then you can get a little bit more granular through that. If you do have real incidents, you can also test your plan as using real incidents. And so there's different ways to do this, but the testing aspect is huge, because so many times they'll download something off the internet and, oh, look, here's a template for an IRP, and the CEO says, hey, do we have one? Oh, absolutely, I downloaded it last week, yes. But nobody has any clue it exists. Nobody has any clue if it works and it accomplishes the job. So very important to test those. And then how comprehensive is it? It needs to really be granular, especially if you handle regulated data. It really needs to be down to the level of who are you notifying? How do you know which clients to notify if you've had an issue? How do you know who with those clients? If you have thousands of clients, you're likely not going to be notifying them all. I did one of these exercises with a large pharmaceutical company, and they learned through the exercise that we have to segment our clients. Like, we need to understand these are the first ones we call, then we call these, and then we work through the others as we have time, or maybe we just shoot an email to them. And they had to come up with that strategy, because in the moment you just don't have time to deal with all of that. And so it's very important that it's comprehensive and it's granular enough, not 4,000 pages, because nobody's going to read that, but granular enough to that people understand what their roles and responsibilities are, and all of the information is right there in that plan, that I can go and execute what needs to be executed.